Roll call.
Jizzle. Neal.
Here.
Olson.
Here.
Luce. Here. Zittergruen.
Here.
Hadley.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Is there anybody who wishes to speak to the council on anything other than what's on the agenda? Come up and state your name and your address, and just spell your last name too, please.
Okay, my name is Karen Schluter, and I live in the county. So I'm not a local resident in the city limits, but I do have a rental house at 608 Center Avenue here in Decorah. And my problem right now is a tree I had. It was diseased, it was a maple, was falling down, and finally I said, okay, that's it. So my husband and I chopped it down, pieced it up, took it to the dump, out to the burning dump or whatever, compost, and went ahead and took the stump out and planted 2 trees. Little did I know that the 2 trees I planted were autumn blaze maples, and they're now prohibited, I guess, and I didn't know that. So your Boulevard voucher, I think, is a great program, but what I'm trying to say is that it would have been nice to have known that before I did that. So what I'm asking for is forgiveness, to leave my trees there, please, because it was at no expense of the city at all. So.
Okay. Travis, do you?
Council can't take action on
Okay.
public comment, but
Okay.
you could receive this, and if you want to take some kind of action, again, 2 council members gets an item on the agenda.
Can I ask why do we
Clarification,
Yeah.
why are those
banned?
banned on the boulevard?
Over 50% higher? How much? Closer to 60% of our current boulevard tree canopy consists of maples. And so just like emerald ash borer, if you have anything that affects maples coming to town, you now lose 60% of your tree canopy. So the concept behind eliminating, I think there's 1 type of maple that's maybe allowed. Sugar maples are allowed. And short of that, everything else is meant to create a diverse boulevard tree canopy. So if you do have a disease come in, whether it's a parasite like emerald ash borer or Dutch elm, something like that, it doesn't take out all the boulevard trees at once.
I guess walnuts would be better then.
So for any kind of action to be taken, 2 council people have to bring it back before the council.
Correct, yeah. 2 council people tell me to put it on the agenda. John and I will have to work out what that looks like. So it might have to even be an ordinance change of some kind. We'll have to figure that out.
Okay.
So can I keep my trees where they're at, please?
Well, that's my question. What happens now? Do we take them out, or do we make them take them out? What's our
Well,
current? ordinance?
Sam Hoganson contacted me and says, hey, Karen, he says, those are prohibited trees. And I said, okay. And he says, can you put it back on your property? And I said, well, I could, but it's really close to the house. And so what I'm trying to say is I'm all for things being beautiful. And my neighbor, Dave Schmutzler, and I've had this conversation about trees. He says the best time to plant a tree was 5 years ago. So I'm trying to. No, I didn't.
We'll work with and figure out what we can do.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Did you plant these trees? How long have they been?
About a month and a half, 2 months. Yeah, and they look great, and they're trimmed, and they're protected, and the deer aren't going to get them. So, but I just would hope that I could leave them, because I'm all for things looking nice, believe me, but I didn't want to wait for the trees to get taken down, the tree to get taken down, and then wait for you guys to plant. I'm kind of a spaz, so.
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah.
I think we'll move right along.
Thank
on
you.
that. But until you hear likewise, just leave them there, and we won't be working.
Thank you. I will. Thank you. I'll take good care of them. And if they get diseased, I'll cut them down.
Well, yeah, hopefully they'll be discussing it shortly so you can figure out what to do. Anybody else who wants to speak to the council for an item that's not on the agenda? Seeing none, consent agenda.
Item A, minutes of the October 3rd, 2022 regular meeting. Item B, claims. Item C, tax abatement for living the drain property, 713 Rural Avenue remodel. Item D, resolution setting a public hearing for rezoning 920 Pleasant Avenue from R1 single family residential residential district to R2 single to four family residential district.
Hadley will make a motion to approve the consent agenda as submitted.
Second.
Motion made by Hadley, seconded by Olson. Any discussion? Hearing none, seeing none, roll call.
Badley,
Aye.
Olson,
Aye.
Chisel,
Aye.
Neal,
Aye.
Luce,
Aye.
Zerga,
Aye.
John.
Consider resolution accepting easement from Quickstar for 308 College Drive. Travis, you want to give some background on that?
Yes, so, as noted during the Quickstar site plan discussion, I'm gonna tie this in with the next couple action items as well on the release of the easements. There's a couple easements that, the current property owners have requested release of. As council had those discussions, as well as city staff, there are certain easements that we need of Quickstar. We are still working to finalize two items on the easement agreement. One is the exact language on maintenance of the area, and the other is the sidewalk. So there's the existing easement in place for the sidewalk that is there currently. Instead, if we want to vacate that easement and do one continuous sidewalk easement, because there is a stretch in the northeast corner of the site plan, if you remember, that does have the sidewalk come on the parcel as well. So we need an easement there as well. Those are the two last things we're trying to finalize at this point. So if council is willing to consider approval with those contingencies, as well as making it contingent on the sale of the property, because they don't own the property at this point. Once they grant the property, we can then get those easements from them.
And what's holding up those easements? I mean, what's the,
Honestly, just draft correspondence between John and Quickstar's legal.
okay, so it's not like who's gonna shovel the sidewalk?
No,
Okay.
no, it's, I don't know if you want to elaborate on the language a little, John.
Yeah, there were no major issues, but things we did want to clarify. Because there's on one easement, there's an access easement, the levee easement for 15 feet, and stormwater easement. And one of the questions we had was about that access easement, some questions about who's responsible for maintenance and things like that, and that was not clarified in the agreement. And it's things that can be worked out, but we just need that language, and I think we got this Thursday night, and internally we talked about it Friday morning, but we just haven't had a chance to work out the terms of that. And then the other separate document is we need to receive another sidewalk easement from Quickstar. They want us to release a sidewalk easement, which I don't think we have an objection to so long as we get this other sidewalk easement. And we have not seen that document yet. So that's why we had some questions about finalizing it by today. We just don't have the final documents that we would recommend.
And who would be, oh,
Go ahead. What's the status of that utility pole they're talking about? Alliant and Quickstar are talking about trying to figure out a way to get rid of that pole or something?
So in conversations with Dax, they are currently trying to work with Alliant about getting that pole either removed or at least moved, so that, one, we don't have to deal with that jogging. But I know Alliant has given them a number on getting that pole, undergrounding the whole system. Correct, Dax? They haven't gotten you that number yet?
No, not a number. We're hoping to just collaborate together to allow for burying and releasing some blanket easements over the whole thing.
So they're working with Alliant currently to get
Okay.
that pole.
So
And by that pole, I'm referring to the one on the corner of Quarry
right,
and
right,
College.
the northwest
That
corner of the
one.
property.
Yes.
Right, yeah.
We're doing everything we can to get that out.
So undergrounding is still a possibility, is what you're saying? Okay.
Would it make sense to, sorry, I'm asking a question. This is not discussion. Would it make sense to not act on this because the next ones set public hearings, and it's hard to set public hearings when you don't know the, I mean, we could approve contingent, but we are setting, in the next things, we're setting public hearings, which would also be contingent. So should we just make everything contingent?
Correct. You're going to lump them at the end of this. If council approves, they're all contingent on the close of the sale of the property.
And you're having public hearings next.
Right. We're not setting hearing, holding hearing.
Yeah.
So you should still go through with those to get that, because the vacating of the easements that Quickstar's asking for, I don't think we have any concerns about it, but we don't want to release those easements unless we've got the other easements we're receiving straightened out.
Okay, so whatever approval we make, you're suggesting we make it contingent on the receiving of the easements that we are needing.
Well, that's what this action item is here.
Yeah, yeah.
I'd make it contingent upon acceptable language to the city attorney staff on the sidewalk and the maintenance. That's the main contingency, as well as close of the property. Alternatively, if that's not something council wants to move forward with, we do have a work session for next Monday that we could convert into a special meeting, so that's an actionable item on Monday as well.
I'm happy moving forward with your suggestion, but maybe I'm not alone in not wanting to make the motion because it's complicated and I don't want to get it wrong.
Agreed. All right, I'll make a motion to accept the easement from Quickstar for 308 College Drive contingent on language in the language consistent with approval from our county attorney and our city manager with the easements we're receiving.
City attorney.
City attorney, sorry, I
Been
just said
called
county.
worse, but
Yeah, sorry.
I don't want
This is why nobody wanted to make this. Look at me just- All right, and contingent on the sale of the property. So we don't want to release easements until we get the easements we need.
Second.
Motion made by Neal, second by Zittigruin. Any further discussion?
Pole? Want to put the pole in?
Oh, well, I don't think they can,
if they can't move the pole, they will be back. We will be back and need another easement from them if the pole doesn't get moved.
Okay.
Correct.
yeah, I don't think that we can, that's on Alliant, probably not this, so.
With this, sorry, Mayor, you were saying something?
Yes, I didn't know if there was any other.
A quick question. With this action, are we giving up any leverage for getting that easement in the event that they're unable to underground that pole? I mean, is this, I trust them to be good faith partners, but it's.
Yeah, in theory, I mean, we'd be losing the leverage of, instead of being able to come at an angle on that sidewalk, having it come down, jog, and then across. And that's if that was a preliminary design on the street side. So that's if that actual sidewalk wouldn't align up perfectly with a crosswalk straight across. Correct, Jeremy?
If moving that pole is part of the sidewalk, would that not be a city request of Alliant for a street project?
I think they're going to, I'll let John weigh in, but sidewalks typically, I haven't had good experience in trying to force that with a franchise. It's usually got to be street or alley.
ADA?
Can't we just
Can't
ask
jog,
them to
right?
do it and see what they say, so they can say no?
Well, I've seen what that dollar amount was just to move, or that first number that they gave Alliant. I'd be worried. I'm kind of worried of what their undergrounding cost might be.
I'm
Okay.
fine proceeding with this. That's okay.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Roll call?
Neal,
Aye.
Sittergruen,
Aye.
Olson,
Aye.
Luce,
Aye.
Hadley,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Chisel.
Motion carried. Conduct public hearing regarding vacating city-owned easement, Kearns Realty LLC property, College Drive. And give some background before I open up that public hearing.
Sure. So similar to when we grant an easement or a lease on city right away, whenever we're vacating an easement, it's going to require a public hearing. The request for current rental at 300 or 302 and 308, there were 8, I believe, listed. as request to be vacated. With the previous action that council just took, that takes away any concern that staff had on these existing easements, and so we don't see any need to continue to maintain these. I believe one of them even stretches back to pre-1900, back when West Decorah existed.
Okay, I'll open the public hearing. Is there anyone who wants to speak to the public on this matter? Seeing and hearing none, I'll close the public hearing. Consider resolution vacating city-owned easement, Currents Rental Property, LLC property at 302 and 308 College Drive.
I make a motion that we vacate the city-owned easements on 302 and 308 College Drive, contingent on receiving the necessary easements that have been asked for by the city with language that is approved by the city, and contingent on the sale of the property.
Second.
Motion made by Neal, seconded by Olson. Discussion. Hearing, seeing none. Roll call.
Neal,
Aye.
Olson,
Aye.
Luce,
Aye.
Zittergruen,
Aye.
Hadley,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Chisel.
Conduct a public hearing regarding vacating city-owned easements on Tiffany Henry and James Galing property at 300 College Drive.
Similarly, there are four easements that are requested to be vacated. Again, now that the city has secured easements contingent on the sale from Quickstar, staff has no concerns on releasing these as well.
I'll open the public hearing. Is there anybody who'd like to speak to the council during this public hearing? Seeing and hearing none, I'll close the public hearing. Consider resolution vacating city-owned easements, Tiffany Henry and James Galing property at 300 College Drive.
I'll make a motion that we vacate city-owned easements at 300 College Drive, contingent upon the receiving of the necessary easements on behalf of the city, by the city, for the city, whatever the city, and that we and contingent on the sale of the property.
Second.
Seconded by Luce. Any further discussion? Seeing, hearing none. Roll call.
Neal,
Aye.
Luce,
Aye.
Zittergruen,
Aye.
Hadley,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Chisel,
Aye.
Olson.
Aye.
Motion,
Video of that motion might come back and haunt me someday.
motion carried. Consider approval of site plan for Walmart online delivery and pickup addition. Travis?
Yes, so this, along with First Lutheran and Sunflower, all three of these site plans were submitted prior to the parking minimum changes. So these got a little bit in limbo, but the main one it affects is Walmart. So they're proposing an 1,800 square foot expansion to the store in the delivery pickup area. And with this expansion, the number of parking stalls under our previous parking minimums wouldn't have been met under the specialty store, discount store classification, but general retail, it would have been fine. Under the new parking minimum structure, they wouldn't have an issue under our new parking minimums. And so P&Z has reviewed the site plan and did recommend approval.
So why is it here if it's not a problem?
Commercial site plan review
Oh,
in
okay.
general.
So but this doesn't change what they are. They still are a special retail. They're not,
Right. It's
will
just
not change what
whatever
they
you
are.
classify them in our parking minimums category.
okay.
That's what I was getting at, is one classification versus another in that. But under our new, it doesn't matter.
Hadley will make a motion to approve the Walmart site plan as presented.
Second.
Motion made by Hadley, seconded by Johnson. Any further discussion?
Just a quick observation that some of this, these questions over parking minimums are questions being asked of a store where every time I go there, more than half the lot sits empty, which I think is just another reminder among many that maybe our city needs to do some serious reevaluation of how we force people to use land to provide spaces that sit empty most of the time.
Any other comments?
No, but what I'm hearing is that we no longer do. So this, which is
Not
great,
any
right?
longer now that the new ones are in place.
We did. We should give ourselves a pat on the back.
Okay, roll call?
Hadley,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Zittergruen,
Aye.
Chisel,
Aye.
Neal,
Aye.
Olson,
Aye.
Luce.
Aye.
Motion carried. Consider approval of site plan for First Lutheran Church building addition and remodeling.
Okay, First Lutheran's proposing an addition remodel project. They'll be adding about 3,900 square feet. The new addition will be connected to the south side of the existing structure. Variances were given by Board of Adjustment for 0 foot to the lot line, parking setbacks, and and a variance also given for structure setbacks. Variance also granted for the number of parking stalls because they do not meet that minimum as well. But Board of Adjustment has already covered that. Planning and Zoning has reviewed the site plan and does recommend approval.
Jeremy, are there any sightline issues with this, with the 0 setback?
Not with the addition. The existing building on the corner, like many of our buildings, would have issues, but the addition is tucked in the straightaway there, so no.
Okay, thanks.
I'd move for approval of the site plan.
Second.
Moved by Chisel, seconded by Hadley to approve the site plan. Any further discussion? Hearing seeing none. Roll call?
Chisel,
Aye.
Hadley,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Neal,
Aye.
Olson,
Aye.
Luce,
Aye.
Zittergruen.
Aye.
Motion carried. Consider approval of revised site plan for Sunflower Child Development and Discovery Center.
Okay, so Sunflower did redesign the building, and while it does have a smaller gross square foot area, a lot of that's achieved when you go from 2 stories to 1. You don't need stairwells, you don't need other things like that, but it is an overall increase of the square foot footprint. So what they're proposing is roughly a 27,000 square foot single-story precast. Original site approved by P&Z and Council. This site has gone through P&Z, does recommend approval. Current plan shows removal of 15 trees. At P&Z, they did state they would look at relocating, taking those trees, replanting them when they possibly could. For those that weren't feasible, they would replant new trees in coordination with the city forester. So again, P&Z has reviewed this site plan and recommends approval.
I move for approval of the revised site plan for Sunflower Child Development and Discovery Center. Second.
Motion made by Johnson, seconded by Chisel. Any further discussion? Hearing it,
Whoop.
sorry.
Jeremy, maybe you can clarify what that site plan also shows sidewalks extending on a private property? What would?
Yeah, so just given the nature of the site, the sidewalk does extend on a private property, which has happened in a number of instances before. So we just will need to obtain an easement from the owner to allow for that to be a public access. So just a step we'll need, but we don't have any concerns. It's just a step we need to take so that the public can use that sidewalk.
Okay.
I'll just comment that I'm glad to be here to vote yes on this site plan. It represents a lot of hard work and flexibility, flexible thinking on the part of the leaders who made this happen, and a lot of work in being creative in raising funds and identifying funding sources. Like it's great to see this thing breaking ground tomorrow, and my sincere congratulations to the leaders in the room who made it happen.
Okay, roll call?
Johnson,
Aye.
Chisel,
Aye.
Neal,
Aye.
Olson,
Aye.
Luce,
Aye.
Zittergruen,
Aye.
Hadley.
Aye.
Motion carried. Consider acceptance of an IDOT GAVI grant.
So one of the airport commission grants that the city has applied for, or excuse me, airport-specific grants the city's applied for is the Iowa DOT's Gavi grant, as noted. This grant is for $300,000 and does require the city to sign off on acceptance of it. So that's one of the reasons it's in front of council tonight, as well as to, and to refresh everyone's memory, this is in line with the airport terminal and maintenance hangar project. It was included in this fiscal year's budget, but council did note that you wanted it to come back for council approval before we did, fully greenlight this project. And so that's this item, as well as the next item on the agenda, paired together, kind of serve as that role for council to look at this project, ask questions, and potentially greenlight this project. So this is $300,000 grant, which would total approximately 1.3 million or so in secured grant funding, and then an additional $300,000 Gavi grant would be applied for next year. That if we receive, which we are fairly confident that we'd receive, this would bring the city's local match down to $352,000 of a $2 million grant. So that's project cost of about 17.7%.
So it would bring our costs down, not up. So we don't have a match on if we did it again.
These are all being paired together to serve as
Okay.
matches for each other a little bit. But our local match, or our true local, which I believe the airport commission is also going to go and speak with the county, because there are some crop dusting planes that are stationed, headquartered out at the airport. So an ask of the county will be as well. There are additional grant opportunities that will continue to be pursued. One is the bipartisan infrastructure law bill ATP grant, right, Dave? And so that one, which is extremely competitive, only 2 general aviation airports received that in the state of Iowa this year. We will be applying for that as well for $150,000 to look at installation of alternative energy sources, solar panels, geothermal in the building, to help bring down operational costs of the facility as well.
Luce would move acceptance of the Gavi grant.
Motion made by Luce to accept the Gavi grant by DOT.
Second.
Seconded by Olson. Discussion?
Is that one you were just talking about? Does that have any contingency on our matching or anything like that?
Right, so the Gavi grant has, that funding is included in the packet. Give me a second here and grab it. And I should also introduce Dave Jones with McClure Engineering, serves as the airport engineer. He's here tonight. So the Gavi grant has a higher local match requirement, but again, these get paired together to bring down the total overall. This grant specific is 72% reimbursement rate, so local match is 28% on this one.
But then so what is the city all-in cost on this project?
$352,000 over 2 fiscal years.
Okay, and we budgeted already half of that this year anyway?
We budgeted nearly all of it
Nearly all of it,
for
okay.
this year. Do you happen, was that number above? I know it was in the 300,000s, but it was 350.
Okay. And so we don't anticipate that there'll be more local match needed based on how many grants we're going to get?
Correct. We don't anticipate more local match, but we will continue to seek additional grants, ask funding for other partners.
You know, anytime there was a motion and a second, right? We're in discussion, Mayor? Yeah, so anytime that we contemplate new infrastructure, I just think it's important for us to remember as, the elected fiduciary agents for the city that this isn't just free money from the government. This represents an ongoing obligation to maintenance, to, putting new roofs on something, and eventually at the end of the building life to replacing it again. I know financial advisors tell me I'm supposed to be budgeting somewhere between 3 and 5% of the value of my house each year towards maintenance and repairs. If you look at the cost of this project, that means this is an ongoing commitment that someone's going to be paying of, $100,000 a year roughly. So that should give us pause and make sure that this, possible expenditure for the city is worth it. Already in an ordinary year when we aren't engaged in an airport construction project, the total expenses out at the airport are about $137,000 a year versus about $30,000 in revenue. And so I guess that $100,000 I guess that $100,000 shortfall is made up for by, the taxpayers in Decorah. And I guess I have 3 things that I hope that the leaders in this project can hear loud and clear. One, this isn't the chance to sort of check every box in the catalog and, get all the fun, things. I think that we have a duty as this is public money we're spending. We have a duty to spend it on necessities and not on sort of things that we want. So I guess focusing on needs versus wants in planning this project seems important to me. But also as a council, I think we need to, look at that mismatch between what the airport takes in and how much we subsidize it. We tell the taxpayers to subsidize it. We should look at that mismatch and look for ways to close the gap a bit. That's not that much less than what we subsidize the pool, for instance, which is a provision of services that a far greater majority of Decorah residents benefit from. Now, there is some benefit from having an airport. Don't get me wrong. I've benefited from it myself, but I think we need to be realistic about the fact that this is a minority of taxpayers who are, we're asking a majority of taxpayers to provide this good. So that's just my comments on it. It's always nice to get free stuff, but free stuff isn't always free when it represents an ongoing obligation to the city.
And I appreciated hearing that discussions are happening with the county, especially with businesses that aren't necessarily in Decorah, but do utilize and recognize that the county as a whole does benefit from the airport. That it is not a Decorah. It is not a Decorah asset. It is a Northeast Iowa regional asset, especially as Waukon and Cresco's airports potentially change service level. I think it's good that we look to our region for support as well.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call.
Luce,
Aye.
Olson,
Aye.
Chisel,
Aye.
Neal,
Aye.
Zittergrun,
Aye.
Hadley,
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Motion carried. Consider approval of a task order with McClure Engineer regarding Decorah Municipal Airport Terminal Building and Maintenance Hangar.
So I want to start by saying no formal action can occur for this based on there's no price that's included with this task order. The whole premise behind this, well, and I should actually back up. When I say no formal action, I mean execution of a task order with McClure. The whole purpose of presenting this, there is no price here, so we're not agreeing necessarily with a contract with McClure to move forward. However, you can see in the supplemental material that the estimated project cost breakdown do have, excuse me, I lost it here. Do have estimated.
Is it the design services at the bottom?
Yeah, I was trying to.
$210,000 design phase engineering.
But you're looking at all the additional, the geotech investigation, topo, all that additional. So you're looking at about $400,000 in engineering. I will point out this is a higher percentage than maybe council is used to seeing for other engineering projects. I will point out this does include the FAA, and that paperwork is much more labor intensive. That this is not atypical, but I'm not serving as the engineering consultant evaluation. We do have, that's one of the reasons we can't have council execute a task order yet, is because the cost, the contract that McClure is proposing, we actually have to have evaluated by a third party to determine that it is market rate. This contract is also reimbursable as part of the total overall project cost. So that $352,000 that was noted before includes the total project cost of $2 million, which has the engineering built into it. So the whole concept behind presenting this task order is, again, to further council's discussions on greenlighting this project.
What happens if the project goes over $2 million?
If it goes over
Yeah.
$2 million, a couple things. One, we could, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Dave, but there's this Decorah Airport is subject to $150,000 annually in AIP funds, which are commonly referred to as entitlement funds. So every year we get $150,000 that we can request in grant funding. So one potential is getting getting some of it recovered through there. The other would be local match. Dave, can you maybe contribute a little bit to that conversation once it goes above 2 million?
And could you come up to the microphone, please? Thank you. Just state your name, and might have to pull that up a little bit.
Hi, good evening. Dave Jones with McClure. I don't know if you guys know the whole consultant selection process you have to go through with FAA, but McClure was selected by the Airport Commission to represent you as the sponsor for a period of 5 years, and that's per FAA consultant procurement requirements. In address to the cost going over what's budgeted, Travis is right. You can request to use future years entitlement funding, which is AIP funding of $150,000 per year that you get. To supplement that, you can also request discretionary funding through FAA. It wouldn't probably rank high on their rankings just because it's not safety related. It's a building, more of a revenue generating project instead of repairing a runway or something like that. So it probably wouldn't rank high there, so your chances of getting discretionary aren't that great. But again, you can request additional GAVI grants, that General Aviation Vertical Infrastructure Grant, through the Iowa Department of Transportation, even the following year, and hope to get some more of that. You will be or have the opportunity to apply for and receive what Travis was also talking about, the bipartisan infrastructure law ATP grants, which can only be used for terminal buildings. And that will be, this is the second of 5 years, and that's a $1 billion yearly fund, but it's competitive with all the airports throughout the nation, and they give precedence to the commercial service airports, and usually the general aviation airports receive a lesser amount of funding on that. But you would still, after this year, have 3 more opportunities to receive funding through that. And again, private donations, local matches, anything you could also use to supplement your funding.
So actually, there's no action. This is mostly informative and discussion.
If the council wants to take an action to greenlight the project going forward, so it does serve as a true item that council approved to move forward, I would feel more comfortable with that.
Okay.
But know that it's not approving a formal task order with McClure, because that third-party evaluation has to come in yet to say that, yes, this is a fair price.
Can we approve this project contingent on a certain amount of money that we have secured? Or,
You could, certainly could. I don't know why council wouldn't be able to, right, John?
Would that come at this time, or would it come when you start actually working?
Well, I believe what Emily's wanting, or potentially looking at, is greenlighting the project if the airport's able to secure an additional 100,000 to bring our cost down to 250 or something to that effect. Is that what you're?
well, yeah, I mean, I guess I'm a little worried in the times that we're living in building costs, that this $2 million project isn't a $2 million project. And I don't want taxpayers to be on the hook for any more money. And I mean, I hear Steve, and I came in thinking that I support the airport, but I also realize that it serves very few taxpayers in regard to other things that are actually more safety related, right? That we need money for. And so I just am really leery of sort of this very expensive project, quite honestly, and not having some kind of like stopgap measure that we won't be asked for more money.
So actually, they could green light it with the caveat that it would be a $2 million
So,
top, I should say.
and correct me if I'm wrong here, Dave. So the council could potentially greenlight the project, go through the bidding process, of which is reimbursable, and that would be subject to the 90-10 reimbursable, right?
The FAA grants are
Yep.
90/10.
So it would be a 90-10 reimbursable on the design side, get to bidding, bid it out, and if the project comes back too high, reject bids, and the design would all still be eligible for 90-10 reimbursement, correct?
Correct. You would also have the opportunity at time of bidding, even if it comes in over the estimated cost, to accept that under negotiations with the low bidder to start price reductions on certain items.
Reverse engineer out different
Yeah.
things.
To get that price back down within budget.
When this was initially included in the budget, I believe the estimate was 1.5 million. So yes, project costs have gone up based on the cost of construction. I'm hopeful. I have been hearing chatter that at least the cost of materials have stabilized a little bit more. You hearing that too? Seeing that too, Dave?
Yeah, I think the cost of materials is starting to stabilize, especially like steel, which wouldn't involve a pre-engineered metal building in this situation, but lead times and transportation costs and all that kind of stuff really haven't come down a whole lot.
Right.
So all we're voting on then is to approve a motion to start the bidding process to get this going,
Well,
right?
this isn't even going that far. This
Okay.
is council just telling staff, yes, go ahead and continue working with McClure to get a task order that can be formally approved by council because it's been reviewed by a third-party engineer, and greenlight the airport commission on, or if it's not a green light, going back to, all right, do we need to back things out of this?
I'm curious what other council members think. I mean, I'm at the yellow light. Like, can we cautionarily move forward on this? But I would like some stopgap measures of cost.
I'm hearing there are several cautionary examples of what we can do if things go higher. So I'm green light on this.
I think the last paragraph of this document, the opinion of probable project cost, is kind of the key for me. That hangar amenities and terminal basic floor plan have not been determined. So as long as we're using this number for our metric for our grants, but we know based on council feedback that we're price sensitive at this level, that we recommend that the airport commission and McClure think about this being an upper limit warning or advisory, and look to our fire department or our water department for creative ways to finish the inside of a steel building with secondhand furniture from other departments or creative volunteer work for drywall, if it comes to that, you know, like, you can have it, but there might be sweat equity or not new furniture involved in the first year, if it goes over 19991.
Okay, other council people? It sounds like that, generally speaking, there's a green light to go forward, knowing that as they go forward, you're going to be looking very closely at what the pricing is going to be for the project, and you're requesting that the airport commission be very conscious of that as they look towards planning for that.
Okay?
Is that any clearer?
Look around the dais, and I'm always a big fan of silence as affirmation.
I'm a green light, I guess, so, okay.
I'm a green light.
So I think you got greens
I
and
would say
yellow.
we got enough greens, so it's at least a lime green.
More
I
green
think that
than
would be
lime.
mustard green.
More green than lime.
More, okay. Well, as I said, a formal task order will be prepared as part of this for, will essentially be the next checkpoint for council to authorize McClure to work on the pre-design docs. But this Gavi grant was another big component of it too, so that's why we wanted to have this conversation tonight.
Okay.
Can't they give it these grants for our roads?
Okay, on to the next one. Consider approval of Elvira Estates LLC at 209 East Water Street, C3 design. Travis?
Okay, so I had email correspondence today that I thought maybe we were gonna table this, because do you have elevations?
The short answer is no. Honestly, because I didn't realize and wasn't told I needed any elevations until last week at P&Z. So my architect has not had time to complete them. He thought he might, but he has not got that done yet because, you know, I'm not his only project.
So P&Z reviewed a picture of a wooden staircase and a deck that was part of the exterior. So the council has in the packet the application that was submitted that does not include a rear elevation of the building. And so what P&Z recommended was to move forward with a wooden staircase type structure on the rear of the building. And we don't have, I guess, that rear elevation.
We can make it, we can do like everything else we've done tonight and make it contingent?
So there's a couple of contingencies on this one then.
Okay.
So one, an easement will be required for any proposed, anything on the back. That, we don't have that process started yet. Applicant's aware of that though. But that's one contingency. Two, the wooden staircase as proposed still needs to meet building code. That was made clear as well. I want to state that here. So that's a second consideration. And if council wants to approve with those two contingencies, anything else, John?
Those are the ones that we discussed. The size and type of fire escape is going to dictate the size of the easement. And this is kind of up to the council. I look at the C3 design review having to do with approval of basically a lot to do with the facade. And it's how comfortable the council is approving a change to the facade without seeing exactly what that change is and the location of it. So
And this facade is to the back, yeah?
correct. It's in the alley.
And Historic
Jeremy-
Preservation said they looked at it and recommended approval?
I don't know that historic,
So why does it say historic preservation and planning and zoning reviewed C3 design and recommends approval?
of what was included in the packet. So
Okay.
nobody else had rear elevations until the applicant came to P&Z and showed a picture of a stairwell that she wanted to do on the rear of the building. And that's what P&Z made a recommendation of, is to move forward with a wooden staircase style structure.
Is there enough clearance back there for plows?
Depending on the size of the structure,
We have rejected other easements into the alleys just because of snow plows. And so that would be, or fire, making sure a fire truck can clear it if they have to get back and project a different way. That would be my only concern.
So can I a few other things I've thought about today. First of all, apparently fire trucks don't fit down our alleys. I've learned. But, so a few other things I've thought of today, because it's been a really long process, right? Because clearly I need a fire escape. We're all on the same page with that, right? Mm-hmm. So when I first started working with my architect, one idea that he had talked to our city inspector about was to use my current fire escape and extend it out towards the entrance of the alley towards like Don Jose's and jog it around the retaining wall and bring it straight to the ground. And originally I said I didn't like that idea because I have a lot of trouble with Corner Bar and their patrons causing trouble around my building. And so what I told the architect is, I don't want something that goes to the ground originally. This was my thought months ago, because I already have trouble with patrons from Corner Bar running across retaining the wall that's there and jumping on the fire escape, urinating on my building, urinating in my back lot, setting off fireworks up against my building. So I didn't want something they could walk up. So then the recommendation that I got from the architect working with the city inspector was to do the cantilever drop-down stairwell. That then I was told by the...
Is that like weighted or something?
Yeah, it's like as you go out on it, it like clunk, clunk, clunks. So then it would be a fire escape that would stay up, would keep the people from Corner Bar away from it and not causing trouble running up the stairs and doing whatever they're going to do when they're had a little too much to drink. The problem with that one is my building won't support it because I've had so many structural issues. And so the engineer says my building won't support that. So now I'm trying to find a different way around it. So what I have found out, even though I don't have elevations, is that building a wooden stairwell out against my building, first of all, will probably take 8 feet of room into the alley because it's going to have to come down and turn because my building in the back is 3 floors, just to be realistic. The other thing that I don't know is possible or not, that I have to wait till my architect gets back, is I don't know. Right now in the plan, in the basement, there's a walk-in door, there's an overhead garage door, and there's another walk-in door he wants me to add on the right side of the garage door.
He being your architect?
The architect, yep. I don't know where that'll come down, if it can come down and fit between all the doors. Maybe it can, I don't know. But I'm just thinking, I like to have lots of plans, worst case scenario, so what do I do if it doesn't fit to the ground with all the doors in place? Perhaps we could go back to the first plan and have my fire escape that's there tested and extend it. It would be less of an alley easement because I think my current fire escape is only, I don't know, 4 feet wide or something. I measured it, but now I don't remember now that I'm here, right? But to extend that out, that would be a lot less space than the 8 feet the one wrapping around would go. You know what I'm saying? But what I'm trying to do is get this project moving because I, as you guys probably remember, partnered with you guys for a grant in which I feel a little bit pressured time-wise because first of all, and I know we talked about this last week, Travis, talked to the guy at the state, 6 months to start construction. When you actually start construction is variable and up for opinion. And I don't like to leave something like that up for opinion when there's $300,000 on the line. I like it to be like obvious. And the other thing is, like, my contractor is planning on this for a winter project, and we're hoping to do it this winter. If he can't get this done this winter and finish into late spring, I'm not going to get him back to do anything until next winter, which then will be way past the 6-month mark. And then I only have till next summer, the 2 years, to actually complete the project. So at that point, if anything gets lost. So basically, I'm just trying to figure out a way, sorry I'm talking a lot, to get the ball going, right? So even, like, I know we're gonna figure out a fire escape, because we all know I need a fire escape, right? But just to get it going and get it moving so I can get the contractor working, so I can get the permits and get everything in line, right? And then the other thing I'm wondering about, which I'm sure our attorney can answer for me, I'm under the assumption that perhaps, since I already have a fire escape that's been there for over 100 years, I already have what's called a prospective easement, and therefore I wouldn't need to get an easement. Is that correct?
No, not with the city. You can't. Yeah, you're talking about adverse possession, and an exception to that is you cannot have adverse possession against public property. So there's no
Okay.
Easement grant.
So I still have to get, so I guess what I'm confused about is, like, if I do nothing on the project, then the project can't happen, which is a very real possibility at this moment, okay? And the upstairs stays vacant, or I rent it out to a church that I know needs a home. Do I still need to get an easement for the fire escape if it stays the same as it currently is?
I would have to see where the fire escape, anything that's going into the public right of way, yes, technically you would need an easement for. We're dealing this with garages and other things that are in the right of way.
Sure.
And we're trying to sort those out as they come up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm just trying to get a
Lori, do you
understanding.
Lori, do you own the land between? I'm looking at the picture of the building, where there's the gap between your building and Don Jose. Do you own that gap?
So I own the back of the building where the fire escape is. I'm right on the lot line. Across the alley, there's a little lot that I do own.
Do you own that space in between?
No, I wish I did. I'm on the lot lines all the way around.
Okay, so I have a question about the fire. So fire trucks can't get down alleys anyway, so that's irrelevant.
Yeah, I was told fire and
I do want
ambulance.
to point out that I was referring to her particular alley. We're not going to park a fire truck back there if there's an event of a fire.
Okay, so that
To be clear,
what I'm saying, in
fire
that
trucks
alley,
will fit down alleys, but in the event of hers,
it wouldn't be on that
it's
alley.
not going to be behind the building that's on fire.
And what about for snowplows, Jeremy, in terms of the size of the easement that could work?
Yeah, this has come up before, I think most recently with Impact Coffee. We granted,
Right.
I think, a 4.5-foot easement.
did.
So we have 20 feet of right-of-way. My actually bigger concern is that we have a sanitary sewer line that runs, I'm just trying to scale it off, probably within about 8 feet of the building. So I think our concern would be any sort of substantial structure on top of that, if that were to need to be repaired.
And is a wooden fire escape a substantial structure on top of that?
Well, it depends how tall it is. I mean, I think like the Impact Coffee and even Backwater Spirits are pretty short staircases.
Right.
So those in the time of, emergency could be probably removed. But I don't know. I haven't seen the proposed drawings for this one.
I have a couple questions for Travis, probably. No matter what that fire escape looks like, no matter what it's made of, it does have to meet code, and it has to meet the safety code, and I'm assuming that there would be some qualifications as far as the grant is concerned that it would have to meet. Is that correct?
So Decorah has our building codes that it would have to be compliant with.
Okay.
Up for discussion tonight is really, you brought up the type of material and things that are, That's what the C3 design is meant to be about, is the type of materials that are to be used, the facade that's incorporated into it. So that's the type of discussion that's supposed to be up for tonight. The question mark's going to be, so on the fire escape, the biggest question is, if council approves the C3 design tonight without knowing what the staircase needs to be to meet code, Dr. Myons was talking about not knowing if it's going to fit between the doors or where it's going to go. So if the site ends up being proposed that it actually extends 10, 12 feet into the alleyway and is organized or orientated in a different route other than straight back and forth, that's the biggest question mark.
So
Can
can't
I-
we make
I
it
still, no,
contingent
wait a
on
minute, I still have 2 more questions.
Sorry, go ahead.
Then, can you speak to the grant part? She was talking about, timeline as far as about when the grant is.
Yes, so I did speak with Nick Sorensen with IEDA, as Dr. Meinholz pointed out. 6 months for construction to begin once award. I believe about a month from now is when 6 months hits. In speaking with Nick, his biggest thing is needing to know that there is a path forward for this project, and when construction starts is somewhat fluid.
Okay, then, let's say, just arbitrarily, if she had a route internally in her apartment going to the outside, then she would not need the back stair fire escape. Is that correct?
So like if the fire, instead she had an internal stairwell.
Yeah, if she put in, a hallway or something that went outside.
Yeah, if she had an internal stairwell, I don't think
Just
that's going to
like
require a
An
fire escape.
internal stairwell in the back. Is that
Right.
what you're saying? So I've spoken to my contractor about that in planning and zoning. So my building is built as a clear span building. It's really abnormal.
Oh,
Clear span. Yep, because it was originally a car garage and they needed the space, and upstairs was a dance hall. So where the headers go across the building, in order to put another internal staircase down the building, it's actually not possible unless I move it into one of the offices and move it way up the building because of where the headers run. So I really am in a rock and a hard spot in multiple ways, and I have already taken up all my space in my chiropractic office. I don't know how to tell Edward Jones, my renter, hey, I'm sorry, we're
it
putting
was just,
I
didn't know.
Yeah. No,
I
I
don't
just
know the layout for sure, I just wondered.
It does seem like we should be able to figure out how to get a fire escape off this building. Right?
Another idea I have, okay, I've been thinking about this night and day because it's obviously I have to figure out a fire escape. I'd be more than willing to have the alley gifted to me or buy it at a reasonable price. Make it a private drive. My building is the only one on the alley that uses the alley. The salon next to me also uses the alley, but it dead ends at my building. But Sheer Wonder's right next door. Her and her one employee, 2 cars go through. So I'd be more than willing to buy it at a reasonable price or be gifted the alley to take care of this issue. Then I could put down my 8 feet of fire escape, let the alley through or the city in for utility issues, and give the neighboring building a lifetime easement to get through. I'd have no problem with that. They're some of my best neighbors, and I know they wouldn't cause any trouble, but that would clear up the whole situation.
I think we still have a sanitary sewer that we can't build on top of.
Right, but then I could, even if I build out towards Don Jose's and continue my fire escape down, I could still do that and the sewer is the opposite way. Or the sewer cover.
One question I've had with that is the property owners that are at the end of that, they still have access, no matter.
Property owners way at the end have a private drive they can access through Water Street.
Yeah,
The building
I
and
guess
the,
I would be just a little concerned about selling a alleyway, but I would have to refer to both John and Travis.
well, it's just another option, because if I can't build over the sewer, and if I can't use what's existing, and if I can't continue what's existing, and if ladders aren't compliant, maybe we do a retractable one. I don't know what that looks like, but it's at some point something has to give. I I get why it's a hard problem, but I don't get why it's a hard problem. It's just a fire escape.
But you can't do a retractable one because of your building, right?
Well, I've been told I think, perhaps the inspector knows better, even though I've read the codes over and over and over. I think it has to come to the ground. Well, my building can't hold the cantilevered one, but what I think would also clear up a problem is a ladder that would retract down, or a stairwell somehow, but I don't know that it can hold it.
Like the kind you see in the movies where you come to the end and then you drop the ladder.
Yep. Or have my
That won't work.
stairs that go down and then a ladder on the building to continue.
So what's the path forward tonight? It sounds like we don't know the necessary easement that is needed.
That is the biggest question mark at this point.
But what
So-
you want to know if you could get an easement. Is that really?
Yeah, and I guess my whole thing too is like, I don't know how to say this. So like, if it sounds rude, I'm not trying to be rude, but like, I have a lot of my time and money already tied up in this project. And if we can't agree upon an easement or a sale of the alley or something to make the fire escape work, I don't want to keep putting money into a project that's not going to happen, because money is already tight. I've already spent 20 grand on an architect and all this stuff. So what I don't want to do is pay my architect $250 an hour in addition to the $20,000 I've already paid him. Also pay however much to have a survey done, to come back and be told no. And like, I get that you guys can't guarantee it either because you don't have anything in front of you, but it's also like, I'm supposed to be partnered with the city on this, and somehow in the past year of writing the grant and doing all this work on it, I just found out last week that I need something different drawn up for you this week.
Well, if it helps you to hear, I mean, this is obviously not the right group of people to sit around and try to design a fire escape that satisfies all of the city's building codes and your potential residents' needs. We're not qualified to do that. I'm certainly
Right.
not. But if it helps you to hear this, if your architect can come up with something that that works for Jeremy in terms of the sanitary sewer access, and that works for John in terms of being an easement the city can accept, I certainly would be in favor of supporting it as one way of, continuing to encourage this very good investment you're making in providing housing where we need it very much. So I don't think I'm alone in that, but I guess this is a site design review part, right? Where we're supposed to be looking at
Exterior only, C3.
Right. And so I guess it's, if it helps you to hear that from me and maybe from other council members, please know you've heard it. I'm in favor of this project continuing. It needs to happen in a way that works with, our public infrastructure. I trust and hope that we can find a workaround, but I don't think your money's squandered. Just the only, no, you got me off my train of thought, but that's okay. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
Oh, I was just going to say that there is no precedent for metal or wood in the C3. I think we have good examples of both, within walking distance of Dr. Meinholz's building. So I think that trying to hold a standard for materials for a fire escape is just secondary to public safety. So from my personal opinion, staff, it doesn't matter to me. You don't have to bring it back for a C3 design ordinance on my behalf for materials. As long as it's safe and can allow for access, assuming we don't want to get rid of an alley, let's just work and find a way material neutral. And again, I am also not qualified to design a fire escape, but could one?
I'm gonna try.
But I'm gonna try. Could one?
I've been trying to.
John, can you, if Lori were to build a deck off of those two upper floor windows in the space in between. If you don't own something and you extend a fire escape into an adjoining lot line, are you trespassing?
Oh, it's an encroachment.
It's an encroachment?
Yeah. So from under the ground to the sky, I mean, that's kind of what you own, and we would need to go through the regular easement granting process. So the easement has to come back to you. We can negotiate.
I was thinking about the area in between that she doesn't own.
Who owns it?
Does Don Jose own that in between?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, so that would be between her-
them.
Yep, between them. And I don't know if fire escape could go there and meet code, but if it could, yeah, then it would be a matter of the two parties negotiating. Kind of like we had all these buildings downtown. A lot of them have shared stairwell.
Exactly.
Well, whether it's a written easement or not, there are those.
Yeah, that would be my.
Yeah, I mean, I'm more than happy to pursue that idea. I just worry about the width, but I don't know what the width.
Yeah.
I mean, I have the code in front of me, but I probably can't find it quick enough.
And the time it takes and all of that, yeah.
Yeah.
Jeremy, do you see a path forward to avoid the sanitary sewer?
Well, I don't know the dimensions of the stairs again, so I
Okay.
really need to know that. But this is gonna sound silly. The sewer actually runs underneath the building, so to say that not put another structure, there's already a big structure on it because it runs north, south, and east to west behind this building. But
So then it really shouldn't matter if we have an entire building on top of it already.
I don't know that I'd say that.
It'd be making bad worse.
It would be, yeah, but I mean, you can't tell me that adding a fire escape on a sanitary sewer that already has an entire building on it is going to be.
This part of the sanitary sewer does not. As it turns to the north, it goes underneath the building.
Okay.
So I would not advise adding, making the problem worse. But that's not to say that there isn't a solution here. I don't have enough
Okay.
details to make that determination.
I would just like to propose, because this is the exterior site plan design review, and I, with Ross, can't imagine a design for a fire escape that I would oppose, provided it, helped people escape from fires and was in an alley especially. Like, that's not a big deal. I personally think that we should approve contingent on design that is satisfactory to city staff, being worked out between the architect and city staff. Those are the decision makers who can say yes or no, and we'll all take their advice anyway.
Second.
So we have a motion by Zittergruen and seconded by Luce to approve the C3 design upon staff coming back. The staff would make the determination as far as what the escape would be. Is that correct?
Contingent on her design being approved by city staff. Is that acceptable, John?
Yes, that is, and again, what I'm hearing is, just to be blunt, you really don't care what it looks like.
Right.
Okay. And,
I mean, I expect, if it's, hot pink and has flames or I don't know,
Okay.
I expect that that's something
Well,
the
that gives
city
me-
staff would be like, I bring this to council,
That
but
gives
I
me
trust
some-
you all have some good judgment, and in fact, I know you do,
Okay.
and I'd like to see you exercise it because I'm done talking about this tonight.
Cover anything?
No, that actually gives me guidance. So I think, yes, you could approve it subject to staff approving a fire escape. I mean, is that...
That meets code.
That meets code, obviously, and then it's going to come back to you for the easement itself. That's not really the site plan, but, yep. Yeah.
Is there
Okay.
just a question?
Not yet, because we have a motion and a
Oh, sorry.
second.
I guess I also defer to Jeremy and Greg. Is that workable?
Have we ever had more questions when we've had a motion with a second?
I think so.
I need some advice.
I'm trying to recall back because there's been a couple times that Leodora to John said, "Hey, should we stop them? They're not supposed to."
Yeah,
But
I think I defer to you as the chair.
Right.
I
I'm
won't
trying
throw
to
it
think.
back.
Our rules and procedures, I don't know is clear that after a motion seconds made that it is supposed to be council deliberations.
Yeah, as a rule, that is not the time for back and forth with the public or the applicant, but it's also your guys' show.
And I think that if you're giving the staff approval, then any questions she might have would be coming.
Mayor, as the chair, would you entertain asking Dr. Meinholz if what she wanted to say would affect the vote?
Say that again?
If her comment would have any, do you think it would have an impact on our vote?
Yeah.
Like, ask her as the
As the
chair.
maker of a motion, I'd like to hear what the question the applicant has, if we might.
I agree.
All right.
I'm sorry, I didn't know that'd be so difficult.
No, just, what is the question?
I guess my question, and it might not even be, is like moving forward, is there a way I can know what city staff will want?
I think you have to, oh,
You know what I'm saying? So I don't go through 5 draft revisions.
So we as staff can give you the best guidance we possibly can, but know that the ultimate decision's up to council here when it comes to granting the easements and things like that. So we can give you the best guidance possible, but know that we are not the end-all be-all when it comes to whether this happens or not.
I think go ahead.
Coming back to it.
Right, but I think what you're asking is, I mean, my take would be that you have your architect actually contact Jeremy and Greg and say, like, I would just have it between them, because I don't think any one of us, between the architect, Jeremy, and Greg, they should be able to design you a fire escape that is affordable, that is safe, and that literally, right? I mean, I think.
I mean, yes, but I don't trust it because that's what was already supposed to be done in the plans I have drawn up for 20 grand. And yet on that plan, I'm pretty sure it says like fire escapes undecided. So I'm just trying to expedite. Like, I have no problem with the motion, what you guys are doing. But what I don't want to do is for my architect to go round and round with the inspector and Travis for another 4 months, and we still not resolve it because we still don't know what to do. You know what I'm, because
The architect
if it-
had a question or had a conversation with Travis and everyone else or not yet?
I have never spoken to your architect.
Greg,
I'm assuming he's talked to the inspector quite a bit.
Okay.
Because a lot of the remarks I got back from my architect said this is what the inspector prefers.
I think the biggest thing, at least from what I'm hearing, is the sanitary sewer, where it's going to end, and the easement. So I guess I would still have your architect try to talk to Travis, Jeremy, and Greg, because I don't know any other way to do it.
Okay, I mean, that's what we've tried in the past, but I can try it again and see if
as
it'll work differently.
I want to reiterate what I've advised to you in the past as well. If your architect says this meets code, send it our way, because that's what we need is if your architect says this meets code, it's fine.
So if it meets code and it takes 15 feet of the alley, it's okay?
No.
So that's what I'm asking.
Yeah,
That's what I'm trying to clarify, right? Like, I could have a really beautiful wooden stairwell that meets code by the right turns and angles and spaces and whatever other crap, but it takes 15 feet of the alleyway. Well, I know I can't do that.
That's where a conversation with Jeremy is going to probably help the most.
So
How much of an easement we can handle.
I'm just trying to like narrow down and expedite it because the architect already said I can't find a resolution. Talk to your city.
I think the amount of easement.
It says that on the plan. There's no. Sorry, Emily, I didn't mean to
No,
interrupt.
that's okay. I mean, we granted one to impact for 4.5 feet, right? And they needed it. And if Jeremy says you can handle a 5-foot easement or a 3-foot easement, to me, that's where you got to go. Like,
Okay.
so ask Jeremy what the easement allowed based on the sewer and our needs as a city. And then I would go to your architect and say, here's the easement we're allowed. Build me a fire escape that meets that easement, right? Is that the
And meets
process?
code.
Yeah,
Okay.
that meets
so
code.
the key is to have the architect and Jeremy and Travis work together in order to get a fire escape for that's going to meet code.
Okay. Thank you. I'm just trying to learn and figure this all out, and it's a lot.
Okay.
That's all.
All right, so we had a motion and a second. And we had discussion. Roll call.
Ziergruen,
Aye.
Luce,
Aye?
Neal,
Aye.
Olson,
Aye.
Hadley,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Chisel.
Okay? Consider acceptance of Decorah Real Estate Fund MOU termination.
Okay, so I received correspondence from Decorah Real Estate Fund of their desire to withdraw from the MOU. And I do believe we've got some members in attendance that want to provide comment to elaborate a bit on that termination.
Just state your name and your address. Thank you.
All right, Mark Lovelace, 305 Grove Street, general partner of the Decorah Real Estate Fund. I would like to first thank you guys and gals, members of the council, that for allowing us to enter into exploring this infill project. I'll try to be brief, hopefully quite brief, got a concert to get to. But since there's been some public dialogue on this topic, we felt like we should make some public comment. After thorough due diligence and project underwriting, the Decorah Real Estate Fund has determined that an apartment complex on the City of Decorah parking lot located on the corner of Water Street and River Street does not meet the desired impact for our investors. We appreciate the opportunity to partner with the city in an attempt to address multiple needs. But at this point, we are withdrawing our MOU, our Memorandum of Understanding. From the start, this was an exploratory project which would retain public parking while making significant improvements to the grade, also providing covered public parking, retain the existing Water Street Park, and add approximately 40 apartments to increase the downtown density. And I'll repeat, the ultimate goal from the start was to retain public parking and retain the Water Street Plaza. We were working towards a win-win, city, retailers, and the real estate fund. Based on our analysis, the site came with multiple factors that made this project financially challenged. We explored multiple different site plans. There's factors that just got in the way. Our fund has a mission to provide both a community return for Decorah as well as a financial return to our investors. We are committed to the betterment of Decorah by providing a funding source to support with real estate development. We will continue to research additional opportunities to help address housing in the downtown area, employment, and economic development needs for Decorah. Decorah is an amazing place to live, work, and visit. Challenges include, but not all-encompassing, daycare, employee recruitment, retention, internet-based retailers, housing, just to name a few. Thanks to many local people investing their time, energy, and finances towards the new Sunflower Child Development Center, which breaks ground tomorrow, there was a need, they worked towards the need, and there's a reality. We too are committed to impact investing locally to help address some of these other challenges, both for our investors and the betterment of Decorah. We hope to continue conversations with you or other members of the community in the future and explore potential options. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
For all your work.
Consider resolution setting date for a public
Mayor.
hearing. Oops, sorry.
If we might have formal action on it, just to tie loose
Okay,
ends up,
sorry.
please.
Move to accept the termination of the MOU with the Decorah Real Estate Fund Group.
Second.
Motion made by Chisel, seconded by Olson, to terminate the MOU.
Yes.
I just want to thank the Decorah Real Estate Investment. From the moment that we were presented with this opportunity to have an high impact investing in our own local community by local investors, I was excited, and I really do hope that there are more projects we can work on in the future. So thank you so much.
Good luck at your concert, Mark. I hope you sing well.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call.
Jizzle,
Aye.
Olson,
Aye.
Luce,
Aye.
Zittergruen.
Aye.
Hadley.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Neal.
Aye.
Consider resolution setting date for a public hearing on designation of urban renewal area and on urban renewal plan and project. Travis?
Okay, so this is for the Bluffside Gardens area. Excuse me. Took back the comments based at the last meeting, worked with our bond and TIF council, drafted an urban renewal plan based on the Bluffside Gardens agreement. That would be a 10-year sliding scale with a checkpoint at year 6 that if phase 2 has not begun, now this will all be described in particular with the development agreement, but this lays the framework for that development agreement. So the potential tax incentives would be 10-year sliding scale. Year 6 is a check that if phase 2 has started with foundations in the ground, they will continue to receive that rebate schedule for years 6 through 10. Otherwise, those are done after 5 years. That scale, again, 10-year sliding, 190, 80 on and down. Grab the document here. So on document 017C, that talks about the possible dollar amounts. You'd be looking at $204,000 roughly for the first 5 years, and a total would be $281 with that 10-year sliding scale, assuming no growth in valuation. So a $300,000 limit is set in the plan that the benefit would not exceed $300,000. Again, the plan lays the framework for that development agreement that was discussed at the last council meeting, specific area, and specific project and incentives lined out. This would be setting a public hearing for next month, at which time the council P&Z will review. There'll be a consultation period, held with the school and the county that they'll be invited to participate in. And then in a month after the public hearing, the council could take action on said plan.
I'd move to set the November 21st public hearing.
Second.
Motion made by Lou, seconded by Neal to set the public hearing for November 2nd, 21st? No.
Yep,
November
21st.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, roll call.
Luce?
Aye.
Neal?
Aye.
Zittergruen?
Aye.
Hadley?
Aye.
Johnson?
Aye.
Chisel? Olson?
Aye.
Motion carried. Conduct a public hearing for amending Chapter 17.96 C3 Central Business Commercial District. Travis?
Yeah, so this would be the time for the public hearing. I know at least one council member and others have expressed to me about clarifying language so that to try and remove confusion. Once Water Street was inserted in there, it did create a little additional confusion there. But this would be the time to not necessarily discuss those clarifications, but to have the public comment come forward. Main items discussed in the C3 business district. The main change was the residential is listed as above a shop or a store in our current code. And as the proposed language, it says above or below. And that's one of the locations, I believe, where Water Street was inserted in there. And so above or below that elevation. And then the other on the, what we termed parking structures, because parking, both surface parking, private parking garages, public parking garages, are all permitted principal uses. It's a lot of P's. If we were to say residential above or below a permitted principal use and leave it at that, that would have meant that a parking garage on the main level, including a Water Street elevation, would be allowed with residential below and residential above. And so planning and zoning took it a step further with creating this additional component of parking structures that said if you were going to build a parking with residential above it, the parking could not exceed the back 50% of the property. So that way it required a different permitted principal use on the front 50%, with the primary being Water Street. That was the concern expressed at planning and zoning. So those are notably the two largest changes. Others included some additional uses that currently exist. I believe wellness and yoga type studio was added as well. P&Z has recommended that site plan, not site plan, sorry. P&Z has recommended that ordinance for approval.
Okay, I'll open the public hearing. If you wish to speak, please come up to the podium, state your name and address.
Kate Scott, 405 East Broadway. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I would like to clarify just one moment beforehand that a parking garage with any permitted use above it is what falls under this, not just a residence above a parking garage on the main level, if you read it entirely. Anyway, first, I am in favor of the proposed changes to Chapter 17.96. I appreciate the thoughtful time planning and zoning spent on these proposed C3 changes, including in-depth discussions held over the past months. Discussions that resulted in proposed language that kept a focus on general retail and professional office uses as the primary uses in the future development of the historic Central Business District. Individual shops, our small business retail, are strengthened by continuous ground floors of buildings presented as stores and commercial spaces. Our small retail shops also require adequate parking for our customers, and this ordinance permits the creation of parking structures under limited conditions. Our downtown historic retail district is a hub for regional shopping, and we cannot ignore that customers will be driving in from out of town and will need parking spots. The range and variety of our small business retail stores brings a vibrancy and sense of community to the Decorah area. I have concerns, though, about the impact the changes that were introduced a month ago at Council may have on the thoughtful work done by planning and zoning. The substantive changes made to the proposed C3 permitted uses and that are a part of the language under consideration this evening appear to open up the possibility of greater parking structures development in the C3 district. These changes were put in place with extremely limited council discussion on something that planning and zoning spent months crafting. The primary change appears innocuous, yet has far-reaching implications. In sections of the proposed code, street elevation was changed to specify Water Street elevation, which can have a variety of different interpretations. One read is that many of the restrictions that planning and zoning put in place to safeguard the appearance and primary use in this entire C3 district now only apply to Water Street, which leaves other streets in the commercial district, including retail and historic heavy side streets, vulnerable to potential future development. Another read is that Water Street elevation applies to any street that is located at the same elevation as Water Street, which is an interesting concept in our hilly community. As an example, portions of Main Street located within the C3 district are a higher elevation than Water Street, and other portions are lower elevation below Water Street. I am concerned that this wording change was introduced as minor without truly understanding the implications and the openings this has created for future development. Further, this potential critical change was made without any substantive discussion by council. I ask you to maintain the integrity of the proposed C3 design as developed by planning and zoning. That is, to satisfy the intent of the C3 Central Business Commercial District to promote the efficient and compact development of the Central Business District for general retail and professional offices with a primary focus of businesses located at all street levels and not just Water Street level. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I'm Mark Mugley, 722 Washington Street, and I'm here speaking as the chair of the Historic Preservation Commission. I sent a memo to the city's leaders on October 4th on behalf of the commission, so I don't want to read that whole memo, but I just want to highlight for the public the three key points there of our reaction to the changes that I think you made to the P&Z proposal. We're concerned about the number of permitted parking structures in all of C3. We're concerned about allowing side as well as rear access, but our greatest concern has to do with the areas in which these permitted uses would be required at ground level. The key here is that the downtown, the commercial historic district, does include Water Street, but it also includes side streets of Washington, Winnebago, and Court. And from our point of view, those are as central to the commercial district as Water Street itself. So if the intention of using the language Water Street was actually to require that permitted use discussion requirement at the front 50%, we would argue that also at least needs to be the case in those other areas that are within the National Register Historic District.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak in this public hearing? Seeing and hearing none, I'll close the public meeting. Consider ordinance amending Chapter 17.96 C3 Central Business Commercial District related to principal permitted uses. First reading.
Okay, so talked about in the start of the public hearing process, the proposed changes. Also, again, to elaborate on the Water Street insertion at council prior to setting the public hearing, the initial draft that said just at the street elevation was meant to convey if I'm addressed as 209 East Water Street, that's my street elevation. And that's what that was meant to convey. And I apologize, I wasn't in attendance, able to be in attendance, and wasn't able to convey that during the discussion. But the C3 district is much larger than Water Street, and I get where council maybe had that conversation or wanted to have that conversation specific to. But now would be a great time to provide those clarifying statements. If the council wants to see something that is specific to water in Winnebago and Washington or other smaller defined areas, because our C3 district is fairly substantial. A lot of people forget the bowling alley is actually a C3 property in Decorah. So if there is stuff that is specific to maybe our historical district that council wants to see as additional provisions within zoning code, we might be able to do that through either an overlay district, to kind of tighten down different things, or I guess conversely, we could create a whole nother C district that even further drives down. Numbering wise, it's unfortunate that we couldn't go.
Yeah. And I think I opened up some of the confusion because I brought up the issue of Dayspring Lane, and that was my concern about saying street level, because I'd been thinking about that as alley. So somehow we've got to clarify if we're talking about street elevation anywhere, so it's Main Street, Water Street, whatever. Keep in mind how that might affect what I think of as in my head as an alley, but it's actually a city street, is that Dayspring Lane.
Can
table this and, am I on? Can we table this and talk about it next week at the workshop to get better clarification and then bring it back in November to vote? Or does it have to be voted on tonight being a first reading?
I would say as long as, and John can chime in too, as long as the changes of what's discussed isn't substantial, that wouldn't trigger up, it's clarifying what was meant by Water Street. If they're not substantial, that'd be okay. But if those conversations at the work session lead to, hey, let's add another use in there, that's going to probably trigger a new hearing.
Right, but just so we have a more definitive understanding of what we're dealing with here.
So can council please elaborate then on, are you wanting these restrictions to just water or broadening across all of C3 district and leaving it as somewhat of an addressed street or street addressed elevation?
I think that as the maker of the motion, after discussing with John how we didn't want a lack of clarity built into that, which I will say represents substantial discernment and discussion on the part of council. We who end up often having to clarify things that aren't clear. That's why the process works this way, that planning and zoning brings us good things to talk about, and we take our legal advice and sometimes make improvements. Sometimes those improvements aren't quite as clear as we need them to be. In subsequent conversations with Travis over the past few weeks, he suggested using this addressed side language instead of water street elevation or street elevation. And I think that neatly solves the whole problem personally without changing the intent of the motion in any substantial way. And so my encouragement to council would be that we do pass this amended ordinance as written, with the exception of inserting language clarifying that instead of saying Water Street, we say at the addressed street side or something similar to that. I think that would be the way to clarify the intent of the action that we took in amending the motion last meeting.
That might take care of what I'm thinking. I actually like the idea of an overlay. I mean, I do think we have to look at our historic sections of our C3 a little bit differently than we do the rest of C3, given that there's a lot of C3 out there. So I don't know if we can accomplish that with simple language or if we need an overlay. But I do have a comment that might require a new reading anyway. So maybe I should go with that too. I am, and I should have brought this up last time, and I was trying to look through it even more carefully to make sure I hadn't missed it. But correct me if I'm wrong, right now a church could technically go into our C3 district.
I don't believe a new church is listed in there, is it, John? Because when
It seems to me we looked at this before because the Covenant Church is in the C3 district.
Right, and I understand a grandfather, but I am very concerned about the club and lodge and that a church could somehow be interpreted there. And so I would like to make sure.
I think if you don't want to allow churches now, with that said, you've got it. This gets into the whole question of you cannot discriminate against types of gathering places in regards to churches. So if you allow, let's say, a theater in a district, what is what I think it's a federal law.
Yeah.
What is the difference? What is the substantive difference between people gathering to watch a movie safely or for whatever reason versus people gathering to worship or do whatever? I can't cite you the name of the federal law, but I just put that out there. What I was going to say is if you don't want it, put it in here so it's clear, but then I thought about this whole other federal law issue.
Right, but there must be a way that you can zone for where churches go. And there, I work in Postville, and I see the detriment to the downtown that a lot of the storefronts have become churches, and I think that's problematic.
Yeah, that we would have to look at that very closely because there's a much bigger law out there that we would have to be navigating.
So
I think Miss Meinholz earlier this evening mentioned that there was a church interested in renting her spot. The Lingonberry could be used for worship.
What I'm wondering about is different than
any
rental.
large gathering space in town could be used for worship.
But I'm wondering if
Or
there is a
lodge
different
or-
language in terms of a rental as opposed to an ownership of a church. But as I said, I mean, I think a city should be cognizant of having all their storefronts become churches. But then I also wondered then, so should clubs and lodges become public clubs and lodges? Does that eliminate that? If I don't know what clubs and lodges means, but that's, I assume that's like the Elks Club or the. Anyhow, I guess I was thinking about we have run into an issue about where churches wind up in our community, and as I think about other communities where their storefronts become churches, I think it's problematic.
I hear you, Emily, and that's one of many conversations that we maybe could and should have about how we can improve our C3 zoning language. But I don't think the question before us should be, is this the perfect language that like we want it just the way it is? Because this isn't our last chance to make these changes or to do further work on this. I think the question is does this improve the ordinance? And to me, it seems like the answer is yes. I think that something that seems to be missed by a lot of people in this conversation is that with regard to parking in our C3 district, nothing in these proposed changes permits additional parking to what the code already permits throughout the C3. You can already tear down any building in the C3 and put a surface parking lot there. You can already tear down any building in C3 and put a parking structure there. All this code does with regard to parking is it says that if you're going to have parking under another permitted use, the front 50% can be parking at street elevation on the address side is what I hope it ends up saying. That's a good change. And I think that it's good for our city government to make changes that improve things, even if they don't get us to what we think is perfect. And I feel like this is a change that makes things better in that if you're going to have parking under another use, we're going to make sure to keep that front 50% of the ground level to be a use that's not parking. That's an improvement. Now, that said, it seems like another consideration or conversation we should have as a council should be, do we really like that you can tear down any building downtown and put a parking lot up or a parking garage? Because that's what our code allows. So I guess that's a different conversation. I'd love to fix that someday or talk about that because that's something that I assume I'm, in complete lockstep with the members who are citizens who spoke up tonight and at the public hearing. I assume that we all agree that that would be bad if that started happening in downtown properties. I'd like to maybe look at that, but like this improves our ordinance, and I'd like to see us, accept the work and move on.
Well, I get that, but you also wanted to change liquid fueling stations, and when you did that, you said this is our one time to open up C3 and look at it. So I guess I'm sorry it took me a little longer to think about these things, but it did, and we haven't approved anything so far. And as I'm thinking about, and you brought that up because of our current issues we have right now in our C2. So
no, yeah, I mean I hear you, and I guess I'd be okay if we wanted to like tweak this. I just don't want it to like get to the point where like we end up not doing anything with this. So I hope that we keep the fire lit on this
so that we don't not do anything. I think we're going to wind up with another reading anyway. All I'm asking is, it does seem like we could limit churches. No, we can't.
Under our Louis Pride.
Okay.
Yeah, it'd be very difficult.
Okay. So then my other question, and this one probably is just an answer you can tell me, is one of the permitted uses is condominiums, but how is that different? Does that mean that you can have condominiums, commercial condominiums on number 22? That means that they can go to the ground floor?
You're thinking residential condominium, not to be used for residential purpose. It's like a commercial condominium is I have suite A, B, C, D in my building, but I own individual space in said building.
Okay, because when I looked it up, it said for individual residents. I mean, it could be
on a commercial condominium.
That's when I typed in what a commercial condominium, because I was like, what is a commercial condominium? Because I thought, well, maybe it's just businesses and different, like the suite that insurance companies have, right?
Right.
That's what I thought it was. When I looked it up to verify, it said that it could be residences.
When you look it up in our city ordinance?
No, I don't think we have it defined in our city ordinance.
Yeah, it's not defined in our code.
That's why I think we should define it.
Where was your defining?
I was just looking. I just looked up what can qualify as a commercial condominium, and so I didn't know if we needed to define it. Was my question. Because I'm assuming the intent is that we have it like the insurance offices, but I wasn't sure.
Business suites.
Business suites.
A condominium under Iowa code is a method of owning real estate where you, let's say you have two unit condominium, you have a 50% undivided interest in the whole real estate, but you have a non-shared ownership interest in a unit.
Right, no, I get that, but you can still live in it.
Well, no, I mean, I would say since it says commercial, that's different from there's residential condominiums that I would say. I mean, it doesn't hurt to define it. I think it's good, but
I mean, I was just thinking about some questions that might come up. When I looked at that, I thought to myself, okay, I should verify what this language looks like.
yeah, I that wouldn't be my interpretation. But you know, if you have questions about it, I'm all about defining things, so there is no question.
I mean, there could be questions about it.
There are
and
enough
so-
questions about this that I think that a move to table would not be a bad idea, so that we can discuss this at one time later than tonight, and only this issue for one meeting.
I concur.
So,
I move to table.
so we've got a move from Johnson, a second from Chisel to table this reading. Any discussion or clarification you need on that?
Just to be clear, I mean, it was a motion to table and refer to a work session, sort of. I mean, that's what we're
Correct.
doing here. If as a result of that conversation, it's clear that there's more substantive changes the council would like to see made to this, then we would just have to restart the publication requirements. But if it's just like, no, they're just making a couple tweaks, then we can just bring it back. Is that how this works, John, or?
This gets into the area of if it's that clarifying of Water Street versus street elevation, I think that's fine. If you're adding prohibitions on what a building can or cannot be used for, that seems pretty substantive. And I look at it as, has the public been put on fair notice of what you're going to be possibly discussing for changes?
All right, thank you.
And if there was changes, then we would go back and have another public hearing. and
Correct.
go back forward.
At what point, John, does this council doesn't have to go back through revert it back to P&Z unless they choose to do so, correct?
I think at some point, if you make a lot of, you're making substantive changes to the whole thing, maybe you do need to send it back to P&Z. But if it's some substantive changes that don't change a whole lot of what the work P&Z did, it's just a matter of setting a new public hearing with a new proposed language. I guess we just have to take it on a case-by-case basis.
Could I
Okay.
finally then please invite staff when they come to that work session to have proposed language to clarify street elevation, just so that we're not trying to write that together. If you can come with a suggestion, we'd appreciate it.
Okay. Roll call?
Johnson?
Aye.
Chisel? Believe we're at Zittergruen?
Aye.
Hadley?
Aye.
Neal?
Aye.
Olson?
Aye.
Luce?
Okay, item tabled. Consider an ordinance amending sections 1076.010, 1076.020, 1076.030, 1244.010, and 1244.050 related to snow removal. Second reading.
I'd move for approval of the second reading.
Second.
Motion made by Chisel, seconded by Neal. Any further discussion? Hearing, seeing none.
Was there any public comment on this?
I haven't received anything personally. I believe one clarifying question was asked of the street department.
Yeah, one question, maybe a concern, mostly focused on streets that only allow parking on one side. The suggestion was to go back to the previous alternate side parking as opposed to the system we have in place now.
Thank you.
Okay. Roll call?
Chisel?
Aye.
Neal?
Aye.
Hadley?
Aye.
Johnson?
Aye.
Olson?
Aye.
Luce?
Aye.
Zittergruen?
Aye.
Motion carried.
I would move to waive the third reading and adopt.
Second.
Waive to move the third and adopt made by Chisel, seconded by Olson. Any discussion? Roll call.
Chisel,
Aye.
Olson,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Neal,
Aye.
Luce,
Aye.
Zittergruen,
Aye.
Hadley.
Aye.
Motion carried. Discussion on sidewalk code updates.
Okay, so we've had several conversations around sidewalks, and so this one, excuse me, staff is bringing to council a couple items for discussion. One in amending our city code to reflect federal law with ADA. A resident is still compelled to comply with ADA, but our code doesn't reference it. So one possible change for council's consideration is including the ADA language, and Jeremy will be able to elaborate further on this with the discussion. And then also included in that very large scale conversation, right now we're talking high level, one of the issues surrounding sidewalks in Decorah is when they are installed. You know, if you're trying to use the stick after a house is already there and the street's already been accepted by the city as public infrastructure, it can become difficult, if not at least problematic. So one method that staff would support as well is if you change the subdivision ordinance to actually require sidewalks be installed the same time as the street before it will be accepted as public infrastructure, and then we're not dealing with individual property owners or driveways that have already been installed without any sidewalk crossings installed, or as developments occur, individual properties that this house installed sidewalk, property line to property line, this one did nothing, this one did just across the driveway, and how we make those connections happen. So this would put it on the developer. It is additional cost, makes the development a little bit more expensive, but ultimately it ends up with a subdivision with sidewalks from the word go, instead of being piecemealed together as houses are developed with a stick. Jeremy, want to take it from there? No?
Sounds.
Yeah, so I think that so first of all, this was a long process, as I hope you can acknowledge by the number of changes we made. We basically did a word search for the word sidewalk in the code and found every section we could, because we did realize as we were starting to do inspections and design that our code is not up to par with federal requirements. So that was the main purpose of this exercise, and as we did it, we found other things we wanted to clarify, including use of downtown sidewalks and things like that. So the summary document, I know Travis hit on a couple of them, trying to break down the big items, or perhaps the most notable. Not necessarily all these are changes, but just a summary of our current code and our sidewalk policy as well. So if we move forward with these code changes, it would require an update to the sidewalk policy. So trying to summarize some of the things that we felt needed to be changed, but also wanted to highlight some of the things that are in place today, just so we're all aware. So I can go into as little or as much detail as you want. Of course, if you don't identify anything major, we'd come back with a proposed ordinance and the readings and so on and so forth.
Council thoughts?
I appreciate all the work that's gone into it. I think that it looks like a lot of good changes. I had two questions. Is changing the awning height minimum from 7 to 8 feet, maybe maximum, is that federal code?
Correct.
Okay, all right. Urban designers, you know, I don't understand anything about it, but they say that, you know, kind of you make spaces feel more human friendly and walkable if you can reach up and touch awnings. I guess that's too bad the federal government doesn't appreciate
What's your vertical
good urban
jump,
design.
Steve?
What's that?
What's your vertical? Can you?
Well, I can get there.
Oh, okay.
I can get high.
I think it's because people are getting taller.
I don't know what's going on, so I can't fight the feds. I'm curious about the desire to have an annual permit for obstructing the sidewalk or using the sidewalk for business displays or dining. I'm just wondering if that creates maybe, more administrative work for our staff, but also an unnecessary administrative burden for restaurant owners and business owners in terms of, do we really want to be processing 20 or 50 of these a year? Personally, I guess I'd like us to at least consider whether, if, as long as you're abiding by the terms of the permit, it can be ongoing, or I don't know. I'm always looking for being less of a burden in people's lives and having less paperwork to do as a city. So
Yeah, I'd have no problem with that. I think the thought there was that they can change even seasonally what gets placed. But from our perspective, the biggest thing is we have at least 4 foot of a pedestrian access route in the frontage of the building.
But if we're going around after this, we're brought about and we notice that someone has started restricting that 4-foot path, we can pull up their permit and be like, hey, just so you know, this is what you said you're doing, you're not doing it, and then we can start enforcing or whatever.
Sure.
Yep, I mean, that'd be my preference for, that's my comment, is I don't want to require people to file paperwork every year to do what they've been doing for a long time with no problem. Or with only few problems. I know there are problems,
Yeah,
but
I would say we have been requiring paperwork filled out on an annual basis for all. How many you got? How many permits do you have?
2?
Right, all 2 of them.
well, there's people who put out sandwich signs without.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. I figured they would all just be perfectly diligent in doing all the required paperwork.
Sure.
Maybe that's a little bit of a judgment on us requiring an annual permit anyway. If we tell them you do it once and then we're not going to bug you about it, I don't know.
This is really nitpicky, but I see it says Portland concrete, but we do address red concrete in comments further down.
Can you state which one you're looking at?
Well, what triggered my thought was on page 8 of 12, comment JB4 regarding red stamp brick. I know you're talking about red stamp brick, not defined as sidewalk. Does it need to be cleared? But I just don't see us addressing red stamp brick anywhere else. Are we going to address that in code?
I will ask you the same question. I think we've talked about that a lot, and
Right.
I think if there are areas, if we have a 4-foot ADA compliant pedestrian access route, that's our main concern. If it's red colored concrete, as we're starting to see downtown, that meets ADA, we wouldn't have a problem with that. So I think we were hesitant to call out red stamp brick because maybe there's a situation where it wasn't stamped very well and the vertical displacement meets ADA. From our perspective, that would count. So I do think it's going to be a case-by-case situation. If there's a sign in the red stamp brick that limits that 4-foot pedestrian access route, that has to be made up somewhere else. So yes, it's in a comment for a reason, because I think we were looking for feedback, because that honestly is one of the things that triggered.
Well, and
this, too.
red stamp brick is going to trigger clearing. It's going to trigger whether or not it's actually sidewalk or not. As we sit here and we discuss definitions, I think it's something that we need to address. And I think we need to address it in code. How it's addressed as is, stamped regardless of like slide rule measurement, and how we're addressing it moving forward. So that would be my only comment, that I'd like to see that taken care of as well.
So are you saying that we shouldn't count red stamp brick at all, even if they've?
No.
Oh, okay.
I'm saying
you just
we
need
need to address how we handle red stamp brick, whether it's considered, whether it's not, whether they have to shovel, whether they don't, because someone is going to call us on the cards as far as whether that's sidewalk.
I feel like we already had this discussion.
We've had that discussion a lot, but it's not defined in code.
My one question is that this is a sizable amount of information. How do you, from a staff standpoint, how do you suggest looking at this bite by bite, or making it more palatable, or how to proceed as far as looking through what we would actually develop from what has been proposed?
Well, that's one of the chief reasons we have it here as a discussion item, to at least start that conversation. It's not a proposed ordinance at this point. If council has no appetite for making it a requirement of the subdivision, then we know, all right, scrap that. That's not an ordinance we're moving forward with. If council says, you know what, do away with the permitting of sidewalks, we're just gonna have a 4-foot wide requirement, now's the time to have that conversation so that staff knows what our targets are. Even if council wants to piecemeal this, certainly an option too.
I am totally for requiring subdivisions to have a sidewalk before they build.
Yeah, I mean, I read it, and my only two issues were the two things I highlighted. Generally speaking about sidewalks, I recollect conversations I had with a number of residents of the Dalen subdivision last year when I was discussing with them that property that would connect that neighborhood to the pool with a sidewalk on it. You know, the comment that many of them made were, well, it's not fair that the city should, you know, assess that to one house, and like when that benefits the whole neighborhood. None of them offered to write me a check to pass along to the homeowner at the time, but you know, I sometimes feel as if the way in which this ends up working on the ground comes across, and maybe even is sort of arbitrary or capricious, or it feels like people are feeling singled out, even if there's good reasons for you know, making sure there's sidewalks happen in certain places. But I don't see a remedy to that short of the city taking over responsibility for all sidewalk infrastructure, and I don't think there's a ton of appetite for that right now on council. I once tried to pencil out what that would cost in terms of depreciation. It's something like $250,000 a year, and that wouldn't even count all the install costs to bring the city up to code. So like, you know, I wish that there are cities that are responsible for their sidewalk infrastructure, but short of that, this to me feels like a great improvement, and it'll prevent a lot of problems from arising in the future that have arisen in the past.
I liked all of the suggestions. I do think the problem with sidewalks that are currently in there is every property is different. So there's just nuanced things that the more that we define our code, the more we're going to wind up with things that don't make sense, right? Like we saw in Bruning, which is essentially put a sidewalk here, but you're never going to be able to make it meet the elevation required. You know what I'm saying? So I don't mind that some things are gray, because I do think that's why we have a city engineer, and recognition that I like it when it's new. New development's so easy. Put in a sidewalk before you ever expand it. But I think it becomes a little more nuanced when we, even in talking about red brick, because of the fact that, you know, some of that red brick is pretty much just like sidewalk, and you can't tell the difference of it. It's just colored red.
Relatively speaking, Bruning's Addition is a fairly new development.
No, and that one's, I'm just using that as an example of like, to go back in and try to retrofit sidewalks at this point is, to me, too late. This should have been done earlier. I'm just saying that even, you know, someone made a complaint about me not having a sidewalk. Come to my house, try to put in a sidewalk on my side of the street, right? I mean, if you required me to do that, then I don't even know how you would. Tear out a retaining wall and...
Like you said, the time to do that would be when they were developing the road itself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's why sometimes I understand that the sidewalk plan can't be spelled out in every detail possible, because...
Although it's always amazing to me that engineers of the 20th century were always able to find and grade 22 feet for the road, and, you know, 4 more feet for a sidewalk. Well, that's impossible.
Right. Well, when my road was built before and then they had another road that came out. So they went back and put a retaining wall through it. I don't know. Same with Broadway.
Okay, so what you have like is in the 21A is the proposed listing, and then the second one is how they went in and changed that. Is that correct?
21A is a summary essentially of all the proposed
Changes.
changes in 21B.
Okay, I've gotcha.
Yeah, I am supportive. I didn't want to make it come across that I was not.
So.
I think
how-
that this topic warrants probably at least one work session, if not more. And I think, just discussing it here it's too much to do it at a city council meeting.
Agreed.
So
You want us to
actually,
come back with all of it.
I think it should be done at a street committee meeting or at a committee meeting of some sort.
so actually, if council would look at both of these, you look at what the summary is, excuse me, and then look at the second one, study that, because those are the changes that they're suggesting. And then have it ready for when you have a work session, whether it be a work session or street committee meeting.
I just because of the nature of our work sessions, I guess I think we should just have a street committee meeting only because it seems like our next 3 work sessions are already committed and then we have budgeting. So it seems like we're gonna need a separate meeting.
So the suggestion is to do it at a street committee meeting. Okay,
And I'll call a street committee meeting after the November 3rd listening session that I'm having regarding streets and sidewalks. So,
Great.
yeah, any feedback we can bring back from that as well.
You said
So-
after, Ross?
Yeah.
Okay.
so in the meantime, take a closer look at all these.
Yep.
John, was there a sentiment about 122840 in terms of the water discharge and versus 1220-110? Water discharge in a sidewalk. The second one I thought was about stormwater. So I wondered if just stormwater labeling that would be.
Yeah, when I looked at that, I guess my concern was, well, that water's got to go somewhere, but of course, if it goes on the sidewalk, I would imagine there's a good chance that that's going to degrade the sidewalk quicker. So I think you need to take into consideration, do you want to make that just an automatic right that they can discharge that water onto the sidewalk, or is that something that needs to be permitted? I don't know, but I would be concerned about taking a look at that carefully and deciding how that should be addressed. I don't know if that's just primarily a kind of a C3 issue or if that's broader.
So that's
Are
definitely
you
some.
1228-140? Is that what you're referring to? Yeah, no, we've had this issue in other locations where discharge from a sump pump or something is getting directly discharged onto a sidewalk. And of course, once that water starts to freeze, it becomes an issue, or even in the summer, it can grow algae and become slippery. So, again, I think that's not where we want our water discharged, creating a potential hazard.
So that's something we definitely want to take a look at when you start talking about this at the street committee meeting. Okay. All right. I'm going to, I'm looking for a motion to go into closed session for Bank of the West lease.
So moved.
Moved by Hadley. Second by
Johnson?
Johnson. Roll call.
Hadley,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Chisel, Neal,
Aye.
Olson,
Aye.
Luce,
Aye.
Zittergruen.
Hi.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, staff, if you're leaving.
Okay.
So do we gotta move to come back into general
Make the
session?
move that come back into general session?
That's how I've typically
I would make-
experienced it,
I
but
would
if
make
you,
that motion to keep it clean.
Okay, motion made by Chisel,
Seconded by Johnson.
seconded by Johnson, come back into regular session. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. City managers, department heads, council reports.
I'll just have 2 quick items. One, I believe council's all aware, but again, reiterating for the public in attendance tonight, the city of Decorah was a recipient of the Iowa Rural Housing grant through IEDA, so we will be participating in that program with ISU Extension and Outreach. And what's that?
Did you say the state of Decorah?
No, he said,
Oh.
you're good.
State of Iowa.
Okay. It is getting late. I could have. And then, secondly, apparently some of my criticisms of the state of Iowa and the Iowa League of Cities have made its way to Des Moines. I was asked to sit on the Iowa League of Cities Legislative Policy Committee. So I will be joining the Legislative Policy Committee. So there is a decent amount of time commitment during legislative session. I figured I would have the support of council when I took that phone call.
That is
so.
awesome. Thank you.
Yep. That's it.
Okay, make a motion to adjourn. Okay. Adjourn.